Hello, Ryan here, and welcome to Star Citizen Sunday. This is a weekly show which covers all of the news from the week just past. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, and let's get on with it. This week, Inside Star Citizen shows off much of the latest progress on ships, Xenothreat version 2, and the upcoming 3.14 Ninetails event, while Star Citizen Live delves into the world of exploration, ship refining, engineering, and so much more. So this week's Inside Star Citizen kicked off talking about plans for Xenothreat version 2. They are currently in the process of improving the event and want to build upon what we had to make it even better and incorporate all of these latest tech updates like radars, scanners and pinging, and the new capacitor gameplay. Now these dynamic events are really useful for testing core systems like the lore system, spawn timers, cargo, ship-to-ship communication and HUD UI. Basically, they can test anything and everything they want to. Now, thanks to all the feedback from the first Xenothreat event, they have improved this one greatly. There are many changes. Some of them include the hostility system. So, for example, there is a hostility decay. So if you maintain fire on a friendly and go over the friendly fire threshold, then you will turn hostile. But the length of time you remain hostile will be determined by how often you shoot at friendlies. So basically, if you accidentally shoot at a friendly or they cross your path, your hostility level will increase. But if you no longer shoot at friendlies or be more careful, over time your level will reduce back to normal. If you then keep shooting at friendlies consistently, your level will increase and you will become a criminal. So creating more granularity to the system rather than it being what it was during the event, very black and white. Now there is new dialogue as well to help players understand what you need to do at each stage. It'll inform you of things like scanning ships so you can see what cargo they have, the players or NPCs that are on board, basically giving you just a little bit more context and options on how to approach. The reward system is going to be based on reputation going forwards, and as you build reputation with the CDF or the Criminal Defense Force, the better you do, the higher standing you'll be, and after the event, you'll get varied rewards based on that. Now, coming in now for 3.14, we will have the next dynamic event, which is the Ninetails Lockdown. Now, this involves a space station that is under the control of the Crusader security, which gets locked down by the Ninetails criminal gang. For this event, both Crusader security and Ninetails will be recruiting players to help either end or continue the lockdown, and this will allow CIG to combine PvE and PvP content to see how we all interact within a more controlled environment. Now this Ninetails Lockdown event is broken into 4 phases. Phase 1, known as the prologue, is to get players online and understanding that something is happening. In Phase 2, Crusader security is now aware that something is creating a quantum blockade around the station, which will make it quite dangerous and time-consuming to get to and from the station. So Crusader security will recruit players to protect ships that they have sent out to scan the area to find out what this is, with Ninetails recruiting players to join forces with them to destroy the scanning ships, which should in turn create some interesting gameplay. Now phases 3 and 4 are yet to be explained, which they say we will have to play to find out. Plus they did say that there are scatterings of content throughout the event that are not going to be handed to us that we will need to discover. Now this Ninetails event is smaller than Xenothreat and will only last around 3 to 4 hours and be completed over the course of an afternoon. It seems like each phase might last about an hour, but as mentioned, Ninetails Lockdown event is coming with 3.14, which they do plan to run a few times during the patch and in future patches as well. To finish with, he did mention that after this event, there will be Jumptown 2, which we will have to wait to hear what this involves. So personally, I do love what they are doing here. Already I'm thinking about getting together with my org and how we can take part in the event and what we can do. These events are so beneficial to the overall Star Citizen projects. Obviously, they give players something to do in the PU now to get stuck into and take part in various ways. But more importantly, they allow CIG to gather so much data and information in so many areas of the game that will help balance, tune and fix as they go, which when all is said and done, won't need to be done half as much as it would have done in the final release version. So in my eyes, I think bring it on. So next up, we have a sprint report. First up this week, we have some new brands coming through the pipeline. Here we can see Eclipse Mutual, which is to be a high-end personal health insurance company. Eclipse will offer a wide range of features like the number of times you can be cloned, choices of replacement limbs, preferred hospital spawns, plastic surgery, or even the option to wake up maybe in your own hab. Jared did say more information on this will come next quarter as they develop the player healing mechanics further for 3.15, and I personally would expect to see a lot of other branded health insurance options from companies either more exclusive or less exclusive who offer varying degrees of options, but I do love the direction that this is going in. The next brand we saw is the Tax Collection Bureau, which is a branch of the UEE government in charge of tax legislation, accumulation and regulation. Jared did say don't worry if you can't pay, as the UEE is always looking for volunteer services as a means to square your debt. Now this sounds very interesting. Obviously there could be ways to pay off your debt in some form of service, but I do wonder if we will be able to work for the Tax Collection Bureau, maybe going out and collecting debts. But at this time, I don't know how much, when, or on what tax will be collected, but it is all to be fed and controlled by the economy to pay for local and system-wide services that can change over time. The final brand we saw was Cousin Crows, which specializes in customizing ships with paint jobs, special modifications, as well as crew uniforms and accessories to deck out our ships. Custom crew uniforms sounds amazing. That'll be so cool for your org, having a uniform that is all standardized for that org. Plus aftermarket modding. I do have a feeling that there will be a whole ship modding scene in the verse eventually, with shows and meetups either put on by CIG or run by players to show off the various ships and modded vehicles. Very excited to see that develop. Now the visual effects team have been working on an update to the thruster dust system that kicks up ground dust and such. This is based on the actual thruster direction to any surface it hits at any given moment. So thruster strength, the surface itself and the force of the surrounding wind volume all have an effect on this, and as they push it to the gold standard, the effect will be far more accurate. After this, we got to see an update on shipboard fire. This shows directionality and how it'll inform the player about the fire's spread, or how it is being affected by the universe around it. Now this sprint involved adding more dynamics and interactability to both fire and smoke, allowing it to be impacted by the various forces within a ship. This is showing a vector field which is used to bend the fire in the direction of whatever force they want to apply. Now the idea here is for these vector fields to be spawnable from the particle system to be used by things like fire extinguishers or full room decompression in realistic and expected ways. And I will say that the depth they are going to, even just to make fire act and behave realistically, will make the engineering gameplay so interesting and even more skill based, and I think tackling fires will be a lot of fun but quite challenging at the same time. Now we also got to see a very brief look at signed distance fields being used to direct flames and smoke throughout the hull of a ship. Next we got to see the latest version of the Aegis Retaliator as they bring it up to the gold standard. This includes changing the interior to meet the metrics for NPC traversal, moving the docking collar, adjusting the lift dimensions, and more. Work also continues on the Aegis Redeemer's grey box interior. We got to see the remote turret bay, further changes to the habitation section, and development on the internal machinery. The Redeemer is really coming along and looking pretty cool. Although I do really love the old Redeemer with that coffee machine and the different levels, I do feel like it'll look cool regardless. Next up, we saw the continuing grey box progress of the Ares Starfighter coming together quickly thanks to the work on the Mercury Starrunner and the Hercules. We checked out the work on the upcoming Canvas Sliced HUD update coming in Alpha 3.14. Here we see designers and artists concepting out the new Drake-specific ship HUD. And now I really like this 70s, 80s asteroids game style, with it being a low-tech ship like Drake. I'm not sure about all the lines in the middle, they might look a little clustered, but style-wise, I do like it. From here, we took a look at the upcoming loot generation testing, and to finish with, we got to see some prop placement overlays for the colonial outposts, which are looking incredible, and every time I see these coming along, I get more excited to one day build, own, and live in one of these locations, We also got to see an early look at the white box progress being built for Grimhex's hospital, as well as the grey box progress on the smaller clinics to be found on space stations throughout the Stanton system. And finally, the continued lighting pass of Orison is ongoing. More on Orison next week for the Inside Star Citizen quarterly finale. So quite a show this week. So much work is going on. It's pretty hard to wrap my head around everything that they are doing, but it's great seeing so much progress in many areas of the game. It certainly feels like progress is beginning to ramp up, even more so after Star Citizen Live, which we are getting onto now. So this week's Star Citizen Live was pretty crazy. It was full of information about many areas of the game, which are mostly in development now. It kicks off with a further explanation of long-distance probing, which is how the exploration mechanic will evolve, and the first question being, can you tell us more about long-distance probing? So basically, it is a system in which players can send out a probe anywhere in a system or within a system, and these probes will ping revealing objects within their proximity. Now these objects can be mining locations, derelict space stations, ships, pretty much anything CIG want it to be, and the probes will simply send back data like signatures that you can then decide whether you want to further investigate or not. And if you do so, you'll then have to move these probes into position to triangulate around the object so that you can get more precise signals. Once these signals are strong enough, you can then use the data to work out what it could be and maybe generate a quantum beacon to jump to it, store this information and its coordinates to sell on to someone else, or just ignore it and move on. Now, when you start receiving these signals back, you will be then analyzing the signatures and the data coming back and cross-checking them with a database of potential objects that you have either bought or collected into a library. Now, one of the skills of this exploration mechanic is learning what these signatures could be and how accurately and proficiently you're able to determine what the object is. Now, this will be very important for many reasons, some of which could just be simply time is money. You don't want to waste time on worthless objects, so taking the signature and identifying the object as quick as possible will be obviously very beneficial. But also it could be that someone is masking their signatures to entice explorers into an ambush. So the more experience you have and the more you know, the better the outcome will be for you. The more accurate data you spend time gathering, the more accurate the information you will get, and the better chance you will have at determining what this is. Now, the probes themselves are limited to a single system, which I personally think is big enough, but there will be various types of probes that you can buy or upgrade to. Some will give a wider range of view, but less detail, vice versa, and all the in-between as well. Also, probes will have travel time associated with them and limited fuel. Now, what I love about this is that you and your crew will be working together, sending out the probes to an area that you have all deemed worthy of sending a probe out to, waiting for the data to come back, then refining the probe's position to gather more data, and then analysing that data together and figuring out what it is that you could be looking at, determining whether you go and investigate further or just look in another area. And the work on this does actually go on all the way through till the end of March, and most likely beyond, as the roadmap stops at March. So it looks like it's going to be quite a while before we get this in game, but I am very excited to hear more on this mechanic and obviously see it expand. Next question is, what is atmospheric depth damage? Now, this is a new system for when players try to fly to the core of a gas giant, say a Crusader. Ships will have an attribute that will define the atmospheric pressures that they can withstand. So, for example, the depth which they can fly to within a gas giant's atmosphere before they blow up. Now, each ship will be slightly different, which could allow some interesting tactics, maybe dragging someone closer to the surface to damage them if you have a better resistance. But they say it's also a generic enough system that can be applicable to underwater. But I do personally think it's more likely they'll create a series of submersible vehicles rather than allowing our spaceships to go underwater, but that is a completely different conversation. Anyway, what are you working towards for loot generation is the next question. So they say there are various loot options. For example, looting a downed NPC or player, but they also need a way for players to loot items from locations like caves, or even stealing items from a crate within someone's homestead. Loot generation covers the various types of items that can be found in a specific location, which also makes sense to that location. For example, if you go to a high-tech location, then the chances are you will be finding high-tech weapons or items. If you find a group of low-end pirates hiding in a cave, you're more likely going to find low-end loot and items in those boxes around them. Obviously, there will be more granularity to this, it is just a basic overview. So they have a tag system that can pick from a large pool of items that match the location, so you will find what you would logically expect to find. Now, it's very similar to the harvestable system in how it's all generated using different entities, and the main goal with implementation is to make sure the level and mission designer teams get as much flexibility as they need. Currently, there are around 2,600 items that can be looted at this moment, which is still early days for this system, so that will certainly grow more. But looting and the ability to sell items on is something that I am most looking forward to, as this will be a great source of additional income. Next question, if we kill an NPC, will we be able to take the armor that they are wearing, or will it just spawn a different armor based on other things? Now, although this is not this team's area, as far as they know, you will be looting what you see. So it needs to make sense and be a one-for-one loot system. Obviously anything in their pockets or around the environment will use this tag system, but what you see is what you get. They did say that as scanning comes online as well, you'll be able to see what they may have on their person, which could help for a mission, maybe finding an NPC or player who has a key card on them. But yes, what you see on the character is what you will get. Will harvestables have other benefits than just selling is the next question. And yes, they will have selling, consuming and crafting, which are the main areas for harvestables. Using them for manufacturing, like crafting drugs, explosives, even oils for maintaining weapons and items, removing that wear and tear. Now, I am very happy that crafting is planned. I think it's a great idea to allow us to craft items for even something simple like maintaining your weapon, and I really look forward to this expanding, giving us more reason to want to pick plants or harvest things, or even grow things and sell on the oils ourselves. Really looking forward to that. Talking of growing, are there plans to allow us to grow crops? And Dan says yes, but he can't say any more at this moment, so that's interesting. Do check out the Endeavour farming modules for more information. And the idea of owning a homestead with a farm planetside has actually been a dream of mine for a long while now, so I'm excited to see this come along, but we're probably talking a little while off yet. Anyway, moving on to refining. The next question is, what are the future plans for refining? Will there be things like metal purity, for example? So ship refining, he says, will be drastically different to that of station refining, as ship refining is more of a hands-on job, starting with analysing the materials coming in, then deciding on what the correct process is to get the result you want. For example, a player could bring you a collection of minerals and metals in the same saddlebag, and if you are using a furnace on a ship refinery, then it may destroy the minerals, but the metals will be refined. In regards to purity, they are not going to do purity. It is more one standard purity with a variation to the yield. So the better you refine, say gold for example, the more of it you will yield, and if you do a bad job of refining it, then you'll get a lesser yield, but the purity will remain the same throughout. With ship mining, they do envision having X amount of mining vehicles supported by a single refinery ship, which becomes the hub for all miners to go to. Now the miners basically will drop their saddlebags at the refinery ship, and then this ship will tractor beam them up and place them into their own ports, then dump the empty saddlebag once it's extracted everything, allowing the prospector to pick it back up again. Now the refinery ship, they say, will likely constantly be running, working through all the mined goods, making sure not to mix the minerals and metals, and using various processes to yield the best amount of each specific material. So constantly deciding on the trade-offs of losing something to get something else, and knowing what you want. Now during the refining process, they say that you'll be adding catalysts, solvents or acids, and watching the timers and pressures to get the right reactions, and ensuring that you don't destroy the materials, or of course cause a catastrophic event. Then traders can come and pick up your refined goods and go sell them to the markets. Now the devs say that the Starfarer refinery might not be able to yield as good as the station refinery could, but there will be far less travel time involved if the ship refinery is next to you when you're mining. Plus you won't have to wait a whole day to refine like you do with stations, as there will be no AFK refining with the ships. It'll all be done in real time. Of course, this could be quite encouraging to pirates, so miners, refiners and haulers may require escorts, But the design for this refining system is done. They are just waiting for a particular programmer to finish some of their current work, and then he will jump on this system. And Dan Truffin says it is soon. They are just waiting for one feature to finish, and then they will begin looking at it. Now, Dan Truffin does continuously refer to the Starfarer as the refinery ship to aid the miners, so it sounds as though they are now allowing the Starfarer to actually refine mined goods as well as gases, allowing you to choose which tanks you have, maybe a refinery for minerals instead of gas refining tanks, or even a furnace for refining metals. He also says that you'll be able to determine how many tanks for storage versus reactors you want, giving players the option to retrofit their ship for the situation at hand. I am so happy that the Starfarer is getting this use and love, as many thought it would be a little less useful since it wasn't really able to refine Quantanium, or since we learned that you have to mine Quantanium. But now it looks as though you can actually refine Quantanium with the Starfarer, so I am very intrigued, so much so that I may even pick up a Starfarer. We'll have to wait and see how it comes along. Hopefully it will get a bit of a revamp as well, as it's quite an old ship and internally it looks a bit dated. But this is big news to me. I'm very happy that the Starfarer is getting this love. So following on from refining, someone asked how refueling will work. Now this will be using the Starfarer as well, and the use of a refuel boom arm attaching to other ships to refuel. Drone refueling, they say, isn't the plan just yet, but it will likely come once they have ship-to-ship refueling done. Now they did go into a little bit more depth on Star Citizen Live about refining, but we didn't really learn anything new regarding refueling. So I will link my refueling video in the description, which does go further into the plans that CIG have for refueling, rather than spouting it out here again. Our next question is, will refueling be doable in motion? Now they will be using the current Merlin Constellation docking system, and if you maintain the same velocity in a constant heading, so going in the same direction without turning, then you'll be able to attach and fly while refueling. If you have completely run out of fuel, you will still be able to move very, very slowly, not for flight purposes. This will be for the refueling process to get attached, but don't expect proper flight refueling like in atmosphere flying at speeds, which is a shame. Hopefully one day we'll see that, because I do think it looks cool. Next question is refueling a prerequisite for Pyro? And they say it's not a prerequisite, but it will be very useful for when Pyro comes along, as the refining opportunities will be very few and far between in Pyro, so you'll be relying on other players or NPCs to bring fuel to you. Now this could mean they can charge a premium or even carry a risk of someone coming and attacking you, which is where the reputation system will be very useful, determining if someone is a potential threat or not. So I expect we will see refueling before we see Pyro. It isn't necessary for Pyro, like they're not holding it off because of that, but it will be a very useful system to have before or at the same time. Next question, will ground vehicles ever need refueling? Now currently ground vehicles don't have fuel tanks, but if they do get fuel tanks, then they will of course need refueling. The difficulty with this will be how they dock the fuel arm to the vehicle, and they would like to keep it as a unified system, because obviously if you're on space you can just navigate in any direction to align the fuel arm, whereas on the ground you only, you could be moving backwards and forwards and turning all the time. I personally think if they use an interactable hose to refuel, then it should be pretty easy for players to appear with a refueling vehicle and just hook the hose up and use the same system as ship-to-ship refueling. Although, as usual, it's probably not going to be that simple. But that would be my guess. Next question, what is the current progress with resource management? Now this is basically the ship component system engineering, how all the components on your ship talk and react to each other. So they say the reason why we haven't heard anything about this in a while is because they severely underestimated the amount of work required by about half. Now the designer who works on this has had to refactor every piece of code for how these items will work and interact. This is a monumental system that will affect almost everything from vehicles, ships, items, stations like space stations, homesteads and so on, so they felt the time was needed to invest into this. Now it sounds like this refactor is actually done, so it's not now they're going to have to refactor. Dan does say they are at the point where they are actually working on the gameplay itself. And just this morning he says they were discussing how to get the tanks on the Starfarer for refueling to transfer fuel between each other and the ship. And they are now getting to the point where we will see the system used in gameplay but there is still a little while yet before we can see a single ship using the full system, like cutting power, rerouting power, and sabotaging and so forth. A lot of other programmers can begin using this now as well, like getting weapons or shields hooked up to ammunition, power, and so on. So basically the groundwork took longer than they expected, but it is now done and it is starting to get hooked up. But it will take some time to be completed, but in the meantime we will see it grow over time from patch to patch. So that is really exciting. I'm so happy that it is now done and getting hooked up. Of course it will take a while because there are a lot of ships that need to be hooked up to this as well as every other location in the verse, but it is coming and we will begin seeing it actually in-game affecting what we do. Now the final question is mining done? Is it completed? Now it is not done, it is not completed, but it is in a good place and will continue to be balanced and tweaked, in particular the difficulty and content, bringing in more difficult rocks, which may require more players or higher end gear. The people who were working on mining are now beginning to work on other systems, so do expect mining development to slow down, but it is far from done. The Orion, for example, the RSI Orion, once this is out with all of its bells and whistles, that's probably around the time they will say mining is complete. But for example, FPS mining needs a lot more love, which they do intend on giving when it is the priority. So there is more they can do for FPS mining in the future, but at this moment, not yet. So that was a huge information drop of many gameplay systems, and hearing their plans for these systems is impressive, and I am looking forward to seeing them all come to fruition. But what is even more exciting is much of this is short term, so mining, refining, refueling, and also the slow rollout of engineering, not to mention harvesting, looting. So much is making headway and it's all coming to us in the PU. Very exciting episode this week, and I'll likely break some of these segments down into more dedicated videos, but that has taken a long time, so let us move on. So also this week, the roadmap was updated. It was only a small update, and I have covered the changes as usual in my roadmap video, which is linked in the description below. Plus the latest lore post was a letter from Gatak, who are the Xi'an manufacturer of the latest concept ship, which was written in Xi'an to be translated by the community, and if anyone has a full translation yet, please do drop it in the comments below. So that brings us to the end of the show. If you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Also, I am able to do this thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members. If you appreciate what I do and would like to help make it even better from as little as $1 a month, all of the links are provided below.